Well, Beardy, I was talking to a doctor today, and he made an interesting observation, which I hadn't thought of. He said he noticed that people were taking longer holidays than he's ever noticed before. So 1 week has become 4 weeks. People are taking more holidays. And his observation is that his patients seem to be more available than they ever used to be. And he believes this is down to the fact that it's now become better not to work and push yourself so as to avoid the next tax ban, or at least spend it all before they get you on your deathbed with inheritance taxes. So that was interesting. And a sample of one, and obviously not statistically robust, all inputs valuable. And in a similar vein, I was attracted to an article by a chap called James, and I apologize to James as I try and pronounce his surname, Kanagasorium, article in the Times.
Your best Greek, that was. I presume he's Greek, is he?
I don't think he is, actually.
Kanagasorium?
Well, maybe we need to find out. But
Kanagasorium.
No, very good. Well, we'll call him Greek for now. And he argues that Britain's biggest economic challenge is not simply how to redistribute wealth, but how to create more wealth in the first place. His point really is that the country as a whole doesn't seem to like wealth creators or wealthy people anymore. And the likes of, I don't know if you've heard of Gary Stevenson, who's this former trader turned economist, podcaster, who is very anti-wealth and believes that people should be taxed quite heavily if they are high earners. And James, I shall call him, he believes that this is dissuading people to take risk and to do the right thing, try and be the growth engines for the country. And he's noticed that public attitudes towards wealth have hardened. And there's a sort of general suspicion now of anyone, I don't know whether it's old money or new money, but anyone who seems to have made a good fist of it is just seen as suspicious, somebody who exploits people, and somebody who just sits there on tons of assets making money and not doing a proper job. So that's, this is his belief. And he thinks that it's fueled by the fact that people feel excluded from economic success in terms of their attitude. So unlike in the US, many UK citizens don't believe they have realistic opportunities to become wealthy in their own right. And that sort of fuels the resentment. And I don't know where that narrative is coming from. Perhaps it starts at school. We talked last week about careers advice. How often do people ever say, have you thought about setting up your own business, for example? Probably not. And then sort of bringing it full circle to the reality of today, I think I would say the last two governments, if I call Starmer a government, because he's gone now, Starmer, Johnson, not so much Cameron beforehand, but politicians are focused on taxing wealth rather than generating it. It's all too easy to raise a new tax rather than saying, what is it we would have to do to improve GDP? And, how can we extract another 1% here, or how can we introduce another stealth tax, such as freezing personal allowances, easing inheritance tax allowances, easing stamp duty bans, easing student loan repayment bans. It's all sneaky, but people do notice it over time. The hypothesis is that we need a cultural shift, that wealth shouldn't be something people feel ashamed of and have to apologize for, and that the country should embrace risk takers and not resent their success. So I'm sort of going along with him. I think we've overcooked it, and both in terms of some of the rhetoric and also what we've witnessed over the last, I'm going to say 10 years in squeezing the pips of the wealthy, or let's call it Middle England. So there we are. I'm sure you'd agree with that point of view. And that's the end of my article, really.
Well,
I should allow you to comment.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. I get a word in edgeways now. I don't disagree with you entirely, you'll be surprised to hear. But I think the problem is, and you put your finger on it halfway through your monologue, that the country doesn't feel as though it's benefiting from these wealth creators. The country doesn't feel as though, because you talk about wealth creators as though It's only the people who invest. They're not the wealth creators.
No.
The wealth creator. No, you did. You said we need to encourage more of these wealth creators back into the country. It's not those people who are wealth creators. It's the people who work for them who are wealth creators. And if they're not benefiting, then what's the point in having GDP can go up all it wants if it's not being felt by the population and they're not benefiting from it, then it's pointless. And that's why we've got to where we are at the moment. I don't think it's anything to do with we're nowhere near where we were in, as you said, Squeak. We're nowhere near where we were in the 70s and 80s in terms of taxing people.
Oh, we have. We've got the highest.
No, we haven't.
You're just ignoring other taxes. We've got the highest tax rate ever. Successive governments just keep loading it on.
No, I don't accept that. I just don't accept that.
Well, you don't have to. It's a fact.
No, I don't. I don't think it's any worse than it was in the 70s and 80s. Like I say, I think we need to make sure that if we're going to talk about wealth, we talk about wealth of the country as a result of everybody's individual input into it. It's not half a dozen different people. I mean, in the States, we're in a disgusting state now where 3 men have more earnings, have more wealth than the rest of the country put together. That's disgusting. Now, they're investing and you could, they're the wealth creators. Well, not really. People have given them that privileged position by working for them and made sure that they funnel their money upwards. That money ought to be shared amongst that community. They ought to have a good, reasonable wealth base and income. I'm not arguing against that, but that's the way we're going, unfortunately. We've got this idea that some people are of value and other people are of no value whatsoever. And that's why we're getting this situation. That's why people are voting for the right-wing parties, because they don't feel as though they're valued. So I think we need to get to an equilibrium. You're not going to agree with that, I know.
Well, equilibrium's all right. Yeah, but I just think there are too many mechanisms, either let's call it political, emotional, or actual, that have been taken to discourage wealth. I was speaking to a landlord today, a young guy who I'd say mid-30s, a worker who has decided he's no longer going to rent his home, buy to let, which he bought as an investor, because, legislation is too against him. Successive governments have made it almost impossible to make a return on his renter. It's not like he's a new renter. He's been doing it for 6 years. And that's just a small example that legislation, normally driven by political will, is discouraging people to invest or discouraging people to start up on their own. And, once you get to a certain level of success, you can be hammered left, right and centre. Now, you've said in the past, you don't care how many millionaires leave the country, but they are. And I don't think that's a great thing that, people who have been successful, probably run businesses in this country, are going to register their businesses overseas and take that tax take and GDP slice with them. So I think there's the kernel of an idea here. I can see why the likes of Gary Stevenson, the way he speaks, the points you made earlier, I can see why that gets pick up. Because people who aren't wealthy, whatever that means, are going to be the ones who grab hold of that and say, yeah, everything's got to be equal.
No.
Slice. They're not the risk takers, are they?
You're putting words into my mouth. Your guy that you were talking about just 5 minutes ago, the guy who rents his house or had been renting his house. Buy-to-let. Yeah, renting, exactly. But the buy-to-let market, you know as well as I do that the buy-to-let market during the 90s and the early 2000s has artificially affected the housing market, so that prices of housing for young people who are trying to get into the market have been artificially raised as a result of the buy-to-let market. So what do you want? Do you want young people to be able to afford to move out of the family home and buy their own properties? Or do you want artificially inflated prices that price them out of the market? You tell me, which do you want? You can argue, he's a businessman doing that, but all around the country, that's what's happened. All around the country, young people, you've seen what's supposedly affordable housing now. There aren't many young people that can step into those. And the difference between when you and I bought our first properties. It's a huge difference. Similarly, we're not just talking about individuals. Take McDonald's, for example, as an organisation. McDonald's, and in terms of the amount of money that the state is having to pump in terms of working tax credits to make sure people who are working for these big multinational organisations have enough money to live on. Is that right? Do you think that's right? Do you think they should be farming off goodness knows how many in terms of profits at one end while their employees are taking state benefits to make sure that they can afford to live? Is that wealth creation? I mean, you tell me.
Well, you've gone sort of macro and micro there, haven't you?
Well, both, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have fewer landlords today than we've had for years, so I'm not sure.
You're pulling this stuff out the air, aren't you? Fewer landlords. Where did you get that figure from? Where did you get that? Come on, give me your source.
I will. If you wait for it, I'll put it in the show notes. We've had fewer. Anyway, yes, buy-to-let purchases probably did drive property, but the big thing has been baby boomers, isn't it? If you take the way property went crazy from about 70s onwards, as we fully came out of the Second World War, our generation were in relatively well-paid, or rather our parents' generation were in relatively well-paid jobs. That continued, and house prices were reasonable. And then the population expanded, house building didn't keep up, and it was basically supply and demand. So yes, landlords would have had a part in that, but the bigger picture is population expansion and just net disposable income. I think they're the things that drove it.
Well, there's a number of things, isn't there? One is, I agree with you, it's not just that, but that played a major part of the buy-to-let market, as did selling off social housing, which was hailed as a marvellous thing during the 80s when Mrs. T did it, but it's had a disastrous effect, effectively long-term, on the housing market. So, but the point I'm trying to make is,
those houses still exist, don't they? Those houses didn't disappear into thin air. They're still there.
They didn't. They're a rectification. No, but these at the moment. I mean, you've maybe not worked in that particular area, but in terms of the amount of money local authorities are having to pay private landlords for housing benefit is through the roof, and that's artificially inflated because properties are no longer in the public sector. They're now in the private sector, and you have to pay the going rent rate. That's not helping anybody. Nobody can afford to buy, and people can't afford to rent without having state handouts to get onto that market.
I mean, so basically we get, if we follow your argument, we get into a situation where sort of more state control, more regulation, and drip by drip, the stuffing is knocked out of the entrepreneur and the wealth creators, business people who just want to try and invest and make their money in a different way. And I'm just generally concerned that we just knock enterprise out of the UK population.
No. We just need investors who are a lot more like they are in Scandinavia, who are a lot more community minded and don't want to make the pipsqueak to get every last ounce of blood out of their workforce for the least possible money.
Well, I'm going to send you to Scandinavia. You obviously like it up there.
Well, they're a lot more enlightened with regard to their social relations. It's not quite the same as it is over here, is it?
I'll get my other half to contact the Swedish embassy and see if they'll let you in.